So what I want to talk to you about today, we have a lot to cover, but I won't keep you long. But this is the generals, right? So I'm not coming in with baby food, I'm coming in with steak and mashed potatoes and the whole 9 yards, okay? So no growling stomachs, yes. But we went over a series in Ruth at our church. The Lord challenged me because I'm more of a topical person. I like teaching topics. But God said, I want you to dissect the book of Ruth. And I was like, oh, okay, that's hard. That's hard, right? When it's out of your comfort zone. And so I went through it and I learned so much that I had never learned before. And that's the beauty of the Word of God, right? It's alive, it's fresh, it's new, no matter how many times you read it. And so we went through Ruth 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'm just going to go over a little bit of what the Lord had showed me through these passages. And so we took a few weeks to dive into it. I'm just going to kind of summarize Ruth 1 and 2 for you guys. Most of you guys probably are familiar with the story. But Ruth 1 talks about how Naomi's husband had died, her two sons had died, left her with nothing, right? Back then, men were everything, right? They provided, they protected, they kept the legacy going. And so she was at a crossroads of what she needed to do. And then she hears that the Lord had come to aid his people in Judah, providing them food. And so she says, hey, I got to go where God is. And that's like some of us. We need to go where the Lord is present. I don't want to go anywhere that God is not present. And so Naomi leaves everything behind, and she tells her daughter-in-laws who are still young, who she wanted to protect, and she wanted to call them into the call that they needed to fulfill, which was to be a wife. And so she says, go find yourself some husbands. And in verse 16, Naomi Ruth responds to Naomi and says, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, even if death separates you and me. And so she decides to go with her mother-in-law, and at that time, she's leaving everything she knows as well. And so we fast forward to Ruth 2, and Ruth meets her Boaz in the field, and she finds favor with him, and they give each other the eye. I'm sure there were some sparks flying in between them. I don't know, okay? But they knew that they wanted to be with one another. And so we're going to fast forward to Ruth 3. I'm going to try this real quick. I don't know. There you go. Awesome. Ruth 3. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, said to her, my daughter, I must find a home for you, where you will be well provided for. Now Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly and uncovered his feet and laid down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. The Lord blesses you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until the morning." So she laid at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized, or anyone could recognize her. And he said, "No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor." He also said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." When she did so, he poured into 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, "He gave me 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." We are in this place where God has, I believe, let me just retract. You're saying, what does this have to do with anything? What I believe is that God is looking for a people who would have a pure heart before him. He has been looking for a church that is pure in heart, because what God wants to do in these end times is going to take a people that have a pure heart before him. And he has been, again, looking for a generation. And I believe what he's looking for is not just my generation, but he's looking for a cross of multi-generational, where we work together. And if you don't believe that, you need to start believing that. Because oftentimes, and I say this very respectfully, and I think I said this last time I came, we come to a place in our life where we start hearing that word retirement. And I'm speaking to generals, and in the kingdom you never retire.
Right.
Okay? If you think you're going to retire, I'm telling you, it ain't going to end until it ends. Okay? So you are not called to retire. Therefore, especially being a young pastor, I never realized how much we need the generations, and how much I, as a millennial, need you, and how much you, believe it or not, need us. And so we need a multi-generational people that would build a legacy. And what that legacy looks like is building a house or a people centered around the Lord. Because too long we built churches around a person, right? That's why I love about this place. You know that this place was not centered around Delinda. Because if it was, you would not be having a service anymore. And that's what you see is churches fall apart, they close down, people get hurt because of a man or a woman. And I question, was your intention to build a house for the Lord, or was it to build it around you? So God is looking for a church that would be solely about him, about being a presence-driven church. But what we have seen in a church is that we are more worried about the numbers of attendance. And although that is a measure of our fruit, if that only keeps you going, then you're going to have a heartache. I know that one for a fact. Okay? We've seen churches more worried about the lights and the fog, and although I love that, that's not what attracts the presence of the Lord. And so I believe that this is no longer going to be not effective, but it's also going to be something that is not attractional. Because in our natural eye, it's attractional. But I believe in God's eye, he could really give a rip, right? And so it's in these environments that we're not seeing the power of God. Why aren't we seeing people healed, set free, delivered? They're coming back with the same old problems, right? They need prayer every Sunday for every single thing. And you know, one thing is I'm learning as a pastor, I got to have grace because it's not my forte. So I'm like, let's just get it together, right? But we got to have grace. But we look at people, and if we are truly being touched by the power of God, we wouldn't have the same strongholds that we've had for years. And what I believe God has been doing in the past 3 years is he's been separating and preparing his people. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes.
And so in this passage, Ruth lost her husband. She lost her father-in-law. She had no protection. She was left exposed. And you would think, wasn't that enough? She already had lost everything. And then she had to be stuck with her mother-in-law. Some of y'all don't even want to be stuck with your mother-in-law to this day, okay? Maybe you let her mom, but you know. Anyways, we won't go on that route. But she was stuck with her mother-in-law. But she knew that God was doing something, and I believe that he was refining Ruth. He was preparing her for what was to come. And so what does refined mean? It means with impurities or unwanted elements having been removed by processing. And what's key in that is it doesn't say that it's removed in one deal, or in an instant, or immediately, or suddenly. It means in the process. So verse 5, which is what we just read, but I want us to look at something here. It says, "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. So when Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly and covered his feet and laid down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, and he turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. And so this is mentioned one other time, the threshing floor, and it caught my eye, so I began to study it. And you guys ever study something and you just get so excited? And that's how I was with this. And so as I was reading the passage, I began to look it up, and there was a good reason why Boaz slept on the threshing floor. And I never knew this. And in these days, it was in the days of Judges, where there was lots of political turmoil, there was a lot of stealing, there was a lot of instability in the land of Israel. Kind of sounds familiar, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't unusual for gangs of thieves to come and steal all the hard-earned grain a farmer had worked on. You know, it took a whole year, right, to prepare, to plow, and to get it ready. And so Boaz, sleeping on the threshing floor, was to guard his crops against these kinds of attacks. And so then I looked up the definition of the threshing floor, and it says it's a hard, level surface on which grain is threshed with a flail. And I said, okay, well, what's a flail, right? Okay, there's a lot of big words here. So on the left, you're going to see that is a threshing floor. And it's made of cement, and it's guarded in a circle. And then you would see on the right what flailing is. And in Scripture, if you look up what the threshing floor was, it was a place of separation and revelation. A place where the harvest was prepared by separating the grain from the useless straw. And it was for the purpose of exposing and collecting the most valuable part of the crop. And what I saw when I was reading this and studying it was that this is a prophetic picture of what God has been doing within His people. Why do you think, again, we have seen churches close? We've seen Christians that have been walking with the Lord for years just falter, ministers exposed, fallen ministers. And what I believe God is continuing to do is to take us into this place where He's separating us, and then He wants to give us revelation. And if we allow and submit ourselves to that place of the threshing floor, then God could prepare us to build the legacy. See, it allows God to take us to the place of flailing spiritually. And what flailing, again, was that picture. They would take the grain and they would beat it against the threshing floor. And it would take out all the impurities. And they would beat it and beat it and beat it. And I believe that's what God not only has been doing on a larger scale, but He does it in our lives. And He takes the flailing spiritually and exposes where the enemy has lied to us, where he has stolen from us, where the enemy has come in. And once the separation happens, then he could pull out the things of value, the things of treasure. But what we often want to do, maybe you've been serving the Lord your whole life, and oftentimes we want to be, oh, well, we got it all together. I don't need to deal with that. I don't know what those millennials are talking about in their skinny jeans and their black boots up here telling me that I got to do this or that, right? We have that mentality. But God, what He wants to do is He wants to separate those things that are not of value, those things that are going to hold us back from obtaining all that God has called us to do. So what does this have to do with building a legacy? If we can't allow God to separate and get rid of all the religious, man-made, legalistic thinking, then we can never receive the revelation in this hour. And this is a new revelation, guys. What God is doing is something new on this earth. And we're either going to get with it or we're going to miss it.
Amen.
So he isn't doing things the old way. And truly, I believe that if we don't wake up as his church, if we don't allow our lives, our ministries, our churches, our families to be flailed, right? To be beaten against the threshing floor, to have all those things that are not of value separated, then we are going to become stuck. And we are going to allow the enemy to steal what God has called us to obtain. See, if you look at Boaz from his perspective, he's protecting what God has been preparing. Right? He's been preparing all year, and so he's protecting it. And sometimes we've been preparing, we've been working in our life, we've been working on ourselves, we've been growing, but we don't protect what God has been doing. And we allow the enemy to come in to steal, kill, and destroy. And so therefore, if we don't understand that the threshing floor is a good place, that the threshing floor is a place where we get separated and then we can receive God's revelation, then we can never leave a legacy. And I had to go through that journey. As a young person, especially someone who has an apostolic and prophetic call, we get ahead of ourselves, right? I always tease with Miriam that I would have married her on the second date. And she was like, whoa, hold up there, calm down, right? Right? But because I see ahead, right? And sometimes for me, I knew the call of my life was to travel and minister, and so I thought it had to be that second. And oh boy, did I go through a journey. And until we learn to mature and allow God to take us to that threshing floor, we will go around the same mountain. We will go around the same things, and that doesn't just pertain to young people. It pertains to no matter where you're at in your journey or your walk with the Lord. And so Ruth 3 ends in the fact that Boaz wants to marry Ruth. However, if we read onto that passage, this is someone closer. There's someone closer in her lineage. So back then, there was certain customs that had to take place. And so Boaz was a part of the lineage of her father-in-law. And so he would be able and have the right to take her to marry. But he has such integrity that he says, hey, there's someone even closer in that line. And so I have to do it the right way. I have to go ask him for permission. And I have to ask him, does he want to marry you? And if he doesn't, then I can marry you. And so they go on this journey, and they leave that field, and we're going to go into Ruth 4. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here, and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, he responded. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you will acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and the transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech and Kilian and Mahon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Torres, whom Tamar bore to Judah." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. "I will redeem it," he said. Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth. I was like, we read that already. See? Okay. So there's a lot that happened there, but we're going to dissect it real quick. So remember, in order for us to build a legacy that lasts, we must allow our lives to be refined. Trust and submit to the place of separation so God could bring the revelation. And in verse 4 through 6, it says, "I will redeem it." And we notice that this man, this other man that was in line to marry Ruth, he was never named. And I want us to keep that in mind. He says, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this time, the guardian redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it, because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it, I cannot do it." And see, this man was more worried about himself. He was more worried about his own property, his own security. This man who is unnamed had a role in this type of situation. See, both him and Boaz were what the Hebrew word called goel. And goel is that sometimes translated into kinsman redeemer. That's what goel means. So their position in that moment was to be a goel. And goel means kinsman redeemer. And again, they played a role in the family life of Israel. And the kinsman redeemer was responsible to buy a fellow Israelite out of slavery. He was responsible to avenge those who had been murdered in a family, to bring justice. He was responsible to buy back land that had been forfeited. He was responsible to carry on the family name by marrying a childless widow. And so he had this responsibility, this unnamed man, but he would not fulfill his obligation or his purpose or his authority because he was more concerned about what he saw in the natural. If we believe that we don't allow ourselves, or we don't want to be refined on the threshing floor, if we don't allow it, then we cannot get those things separated from us. And then we will never receive the revelation from God. And if we never receive the revelation from God, we will miss moments like this. This man missed a moment on a legacy. And we're going to learn that, or we're going to touch that here in a second. When Boaz brought the matter up to the near kinsman, or goel, or this unnamed man, he brought it up as a matter regarding property. Something any man would be interested in. Back then, what you owned was everything. Something anyone would want to buy back is a piece of property and keep it in the family name. because of Boaz's way of framing it, this was the first time the near kinsman considered this, and it was a pretty big question to take it all at once. When it was just a matter of property, he said, yes. He didn't even stutter. He said, I will redeem it. But then Boaz comes back and says, well, guess what? You get a wife and you get a mother-in-law. In our natural eye, we'd say, heck no. But see, sometimes we could be like that in the kingdom of God. We could be given an opportunity to serve others, to step out in faith, to pray for someone, to take someone out to lunch, to encourage someone, to preach to someone. But because it doesn't fit our plan, we reject it. Because it doesn't fit our daily lifestyle, we reject it. Because it may cost a little bit of your time or your money, we don't have time for it. I don't have time to go hang out with those young people. They have that loud music and they get on my nerves anyways. Right? If I looked in the natural and said, heck no, God, I ain't going to pastor people. That's the worst job on earth. They give you headaches, they stress you out, they make you age. Right? Hey, it's the worst thing on earth. Plus you don't get paid for it. Right? If I looked on it in the natural eye. When we allow our own selfish desires, then it allows us to separate us from God's will. And I talk like this, and I know we're speaking in generals, but I think we need a reminder that we cannot give in or we cannot respond to things in our natural state. And I think sometimes, especially working with those who've been walking with the Lord, it's so easy to say, I've been there, I've done that. And I think that phrase needs to go out the window.
Right.
Because I've heard that before. Oh, I've served in kids ministry. Well, when did you become too high to serve the next generation?
Right.
Well, you know what? I used to get to church early and serve, but I don't do that anymore. Well, when did you become too high to serve in the house of the Lord? Right? I don't have time for that. I'm too old to serve. I've been there. I've done that. And we become like this man, self-absorbed, not looking at the legacy that can be birthed out of our obedience or out of our yes. And we're going to find out in a few minutes what that legacy was. So I want us to look at Naomi as we land the plane here. Verse 14, may he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better than you, than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child in her arms, and she cared for him. So Naomi was the one who made the decision to go back to the Lord. If you research, and we don't have time to go over that, a lot of scholars and theologians believe because she was living in a foreign land, at some point she was disobedient. Because she had left the promised land. But she ended up returning to the land because remember she heard what God was doing in Judah. And now she has a grandson. And now it says he's going to be famous throughout Israel. And now she gets to take care of him. It was fitting that these blessings in the life of Naomi be given so much attention at the end of the book. Naomi was the one whose original returning to the Lord began all this great work of God. If Naomi had not decided to go back to Bethlehem, the land of Israel, the God of Israel, none of this would have happened. And so we have to ask ourselves, on the other side of our obedience, what is there? Could it be someone's destiny? If she would have never returned back to the land, would Ruth and Boaz have met? Would they have bore a son? On the other side of your obedience could be someone's destiny. Could be not only someone else to fulfill the God call in their life, but the blessing that God has for you. Verse 17 through 22, the woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. The genealogy of David. Who loves the genealogy? Because I don't, but I took time to read it. Okay. And this is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father, we're just going to call him A. A, the father of Naasson. Naasson, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz. Boaz, the father of Obed. Obed, the father of Jesse. And Jesse, the father of David. Okay? I want us to capture this. You guys ready?
Yep.
Doesn't sound like it. You guys ready? Right. Okay. Naomi loses everything. She's old. It seems like everything is at a loss. Naomi, however, has this inclination that there is more. So therefore she returns to Bethlehem. And from this, Boaz and Ruth marry. Then they have a child named Obed. And Obed has a child named Jesse. And Jesse has a child named David. And David is a man after God's own heart. We could stop there and be like, hey, David is amazing. Right? Messed up, but amazing. Okay? But look at the roots of David. It was in Bethlehem. And we got to see something here. Luke 2:1-5. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. And everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judah, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he had belonged to the house line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. So Naomi was obedient. Ruth and Boaz allowed themselves to be used by God, to be refined by God at the threshing floor. And because they allowed God to move in their life, to be refined, to be separated, it was because of their obedience, Joseph and Mary had to go to Bethlehem to register in the census of Augustus. Ruth and Boaz are the reason why Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Because they said right there, we have to go back because it's the house line of David. Well, who is David's great-great-great-grandparents? Some of you today look like that unnamed man. You have been in a place looking at your situation, looking at the impossibility, looking at your time, your money, your age, or just, I don't want to. Can you imagine if that unnamed man said yes? Yes, I would take the property. Yes, I will take in Ruth and her mother-in-law. He may have been named. But not only that, he would have been in the lineage of Jesus. Capture that. What is our yes today? What is our obedience today for the tomorrow? Because as generals, if you are just self-absorbed looking at, okay, what do I need to do? What encounter do I need to have today with the Lord? But we're not willing to take others with us, then when the generals, when your time passes on earth, will there be any generals to raise up? He would have inherited a land, a wife, a mother-in-law. But again, he would have been part of the legacy of Jesus. And you have to realize that sometimes we are the ones that are holding back the blessing of the Lord. But not only our blessing, but the blessing of others. Because again, you look back at Naomi, she was blessed. Her grandson became famous. She, by becoming a part of Boaz's family, she was protected. She inherited land with him. And she not only had all that, but she was tied in to the birth of Jesus. But it was because she said yes to the Lord. And then because she said yes, Ruth and Boaz were blessed. And because they said yes to the Lord and allowed them to be in that threshing floor and flailed and beaten, so all the impurities, all the things that are not of value would be separated, then they were able to hear of the Lord and they were able to build a legacy. And so that's the question today, is what are you building today? You know, one thing I talk about our church is we can't even worry about us anymore. What are we doing with our children? How are we building them up to be generals, to build a legacy? Let's stand.